First of all, of course, we'd love to thank our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we would not be able to bring you these programs. We are so blessed to have our pharma companies. All of them are either in the ones on the screen are in phase 2 or phase 3 trials, or getting ready to launch their trial. So we've got lots of great options, as you can see, that are coming. Lots of hope for us on the horizon. So we're really excited about that. Let's see. Now I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. And so for those of you that don't know me, I am Carrie Enoch. I am the Campaign and Programs Director for the IgA Nephropathy Foundation of America. My 16-year-old daughter has IgA nephropathy. She was diagnosed when she was 8 years old. She is currently in remission, so we are super lucky over here in our house right now to not be going through any hardships. But we've been down that road, so I'm always here to answer any questions that you have. Tonight, I am excited to bring you our founders, Bonnie and Ed Schneider, who founded the IgA Nephropathy Foundation 16 years ago. Bonnie?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining in. We're super excited to have you listening in and getting more education about our disease. Very briefly, our son was diagnosed at age 13. 16 years later, he's in a good place. He's had a couple flare-ups, but basically he's in that remission that we call it, which we know there is no such real name for that. But we're very excited that we've been able to start the foundation and create this safe place for everybody to go, share their stories, just be together as one big family. And hopefully next year we'll be at Spark Live and we'll actually be able to hug each other. So I'm super excited to have everybody here tonight.
Thanks, guys. And Ed's back there in the back. Go ahead, Ed.
Yes.
See you.
Hey, thanks everybody for being here again. And as Bonnie said, these Wednesdays have been a long stretch, and we got a couple more to go. And thank you for showing up and listening. And hopefully next year we're going to be down in Nashville, which my daughter went to college at Belmont University in Nashville, and calls it a beautiful little city. And we're going to have we're going to learn a lot, and we're going to have a lot of fun. So thanks everybody.
All righty, thanks, guys. And now I'm going to introduce Stuart, our Director of Strategic Plan. And Stuart, you're going to have to tell your other new title, because I don't have it committed to memory yet. But Stuart is something government affairs, I think. He's just jack of all trades for our foundation. He keeps Bonnie and I in check, keeps everything going, makes us look really good out there. So, and on top of that, he's also an ambassador for the AAKP. He is also an ambassador for the National Kidney Foundation, and he owns his own wholesale home decor business. So he's a super busy guy and gives us so much of his time, and we just love Stuart. So, Stuart, it's all you.
Thanks, Carrie. I appreciate the introduction, and keeping you and Bonnie in line is a full-time job, no doubt about that. So, hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us tonight for the 7th week of our Spark series. In 2007, I was diagnosed with IgA nephropathy, and in 2018, I was lucky enough to get a preemptive transplant through a living donor exchange program. My wife donated her kidney, and I received a kidney from someone in California. I consider that my second lease on life, and I feel as though I need to give back and share my story, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so active in the foundation. Very lucky to be a part of the leadership team. We have got a great group, and we're really excited about growing the foundation, and hopefully some of you guys can join us as we continue to grow. Just a couple of housekeeping tips for tonight. Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. If you have any questions, add them to the chat box, and then we'll ask the questions at the end of the presentation. I'd like to introduce Harvey Micel. He's our speaker for tonight. Harvey's a 2-time kidney transplant recipient. He founded the Living Kidney Donor Network after he realized that those in need of a kidney transplant weren't getting the information they needed to become successful at finding a living donor. Through his workshops, webcasts, and personal consultation, Harvey has helped hundreds of recipients and donors through the transplant process. Harvey has a unique perspective and a deep understanding of how recipients can achieve success. Harvey has presented this information to thousands of patients at transplant centers, dialysis companies, the National Kidney Foundation affiliates, and many other organizations that support those who need a kidney transplant. Tonight, you're going to hear about a new online program that Harvey has developed called Having Your Donor Find You. The IgA Nephropathy Foundation is happy to join Harvey to make this information available and program available to our members. And Harvey will provide you with that information about having you find your living donor. Please welcome Harvey.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you, Ed and Bonnie, for making this happen, and Carrie on the technical side. Very impressive, very impressive. So let me see if I can go ahead and share my presentation. That should work. And I'm still on the screen also?
You're good.
Okay, great. All right. And quick one there. Great. Okay. So thanks so much. Let me give you a little background. As Stuart said, I'm a two-time kidney transplant recipient. I have a kind of similar condition to IgA nephropathy. It's called PKD, polycystic kidney disease. It's also a genetic or an inherited condition. A little different in that the cysts grow on your kidneys, and over years the cysts get bigger and bigger. Many people don't get ill like IgA, and after a while your kidney function starts to decline because the cysts are not allowing the kidney to do its job. Many people in their 50s need a kidney transplant. I was very fortunate in that my wife donated to me. And directly, we'll talk about paired exchanges, as Stuart referred to in his experience. But I was very, very fortunate that my wife was able to donate. Shortly thereafter, I realized from what I learned, and this was 2007 when she donated to me. But shortly after that, I realized I got worked up at 3 transplant centers. I visited many dialysis clinics, asked lots of questions, and I realized that everyone that I spoke to were similar to me and didn't know much about living donation. So that became really my mission in life. And I started the Living Kidney Donors Network. Our primary mission is to help people who need or will need a kidney transplant have a successful experience. And you can do that. I firmly believe that for everyone who needs a kidney transplant, there are donors out there. The big challenge is letting them know about your situation. And maybe the title of this presentation may sound strange to you, having your donor find you, but that's what really happens. You get the story out there and your donor finds you. That person has empathy, feels your need, and for some reason wants to help you. Is that everyone? No, unfortunately, it's not everyone. But you don't need to ask someone to donate a kidney. And that's what's really stopped me for many years talking about my situation. I knew 20 years before my transplant that someday I'll need one, told no one, because I was afraid to ask. You don't need to ask someone. You need to tell your story. It's all about your story. And that's what we do in life. We tell stories, whether it's a good restaurant, a bad restaurant, a movie, what happened to them, you're meeting someone, what happened along the way. We're all about stories. So much of my presentation is going to be talking about your story and how you can be comfortable telling your story, because that's the 6,000 plus transplants a year are happening because someone heard about their situation and wanted to do something. And we'll talk a lot about advocates. Advocates are an essential part of the process. Many donors found out about their recipient's need from an advocate. There's no data on this, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's 20, 30, 40, or even 50% of the time that occurs. Now, that person may have known the individual that they donated to, but they didn't know about their need. And that's the important part, is getting the story out there and telling your story and having others hearing your story. So let's get started. go through the program. And Carrie, we're going to wait for questions at the end. You have, do you want to give any directions as to how to ask a question?
Sure, you guys can just type your questions in the chat box throughout the presentation, and then Harvey, we will present them to you at the end. Stuart will go ahead and ask you the questions at the end so we don't interrupt.
If there's something that you feel is important that comes up, please do interrupt me. Sometimes that works nicely if you think it's an urgent question. And at the end,
Okay, so type urgent in with your question so we know to interrupt for that. That would be perfect.
Great. Stuart referenced a new program that I've developed. It's an online program. I developed it. I've wanted to do this for years. And as soon as COVID hit, I started and I wrote the program, recorded it, edited it, and IgA nephropathy is I'm going to give you a link to their website because they are hosting the program. They're one of the organizations that are hosting the program that has just started. So towards the end, you'll get that. And you don't need to take notes in terms of what's on the screen. If I say something unique or you want to write down, that's fine. But I'm going to give you a link that has all of the slides that are there, and you'll get that towards the end also. About much is a medical question. Okay, that's not my role. And only a medical doctor and a medical doctor really from a transplant center should give you advice about a transplant because they're the only ones that know your whole health situation. In the business world, they say knowledge is power. Here, knowledge is confidence. Okay, the more you know about what you have in terms of IgA or about living donation, the easier it is to talk about it. Okay. At the beginning, it was probably very hard to talk about COVID because we didn't know what to say. Now we know. But even that's the case. If we picked on someone and said, give us 5 minutes about COVID, it would be uncomfortable. Okay. You need to learn as much as you can because it'll build your confidence to be able to tell your story and talk about your situation. One of the things we need to overcome when we're looking for a living donor is many people don't know much about living donation. They know about deceased donation. We've done an excellent job with educating the public about deceased donation, but we haven't done that good job regarding about living donation. It's political, it's financial, but people don't understand living donation much. So these are the things that you can talk about when you're telling your story or when you're updating people, and we'll talk about how you update people later, and you can use these. Many people think that you have 2 kidneys and one is a spare, but as the case with IgA and with PKD and just about every other kidney disease, they affect both kidneys. So having a second one doesn't help me or didn't help me, okay? But most people don't know that, okay? They think that they have a spare, and that spare is there in case I get a kidney ailment. The 2 leading causes of kidney disease are diabetes and hypertension, affect both kidneys, as is the case with us. So that's something that many people don't understand, that they think they have an extra ones. People think they need 2 kidneys to have a normal life. 1 in 750 people are born with 1 kidney, and their life expectancy is the same as someone born with 2. After donating a kidney, can't have children. You've got to be a little bit aware of that, and the doctors need to be aware. Many women have children after donating a kidney, and for some reason, and I hear this unfortunately more than I'd like, they think the donors take anti-rejection drugs. Why they think that, I don't know. But that is something, again, another myth that is out there. There is no late age limit for donating. I've helped people in their 70s both receive a transplant and donate. The oldest person I know is 84. That I've heard about, the oldest person I know personally that was able to donate was 74. So it's not someone's age, it's their health. There are many people that are 23 that are not healthy enough to be a kidney donor. So it's not someone's age, it's their health. And my wife, who donated to me, was asked a million times, you are 1 in a million. Well, I know she's 1 in a million, but you don't need to be that match anymore. We'll talk a little bit about matching later, but you don't need to because of the drugs we take. The whole matching process, those 6 antigens, are really no longer a factor in terms of the process. Some things that come up recently is tattoos, which many people have, doesn't prevent you from being a donor. And this is a little more applicable now in many states about smoking marijuana. That should not preclude you from being a donor either. But people still think that. There are about 115,000 people waiting for all organs. Most are waiting for a kidney. Okay, 93,000 people are waiting a kidney, but that just pales in terms of the number in need. There are over 500,000 people on dialysis. Obviously, all of them need a kidney transplant. Most of them are probably healthy enough to get a transplant. Many issues there in terms of communication. But that is a big challenge for people. The longer you're on dialysis, your health deteriorates and it becomes more difficult. Stuart referenced the term of preemptive transplant. That means he didn't have to go on dialysis beforehand. And the statistics show long-term benefit of not being on dialysis post-transplant. So if you can avoid being on dialysis, that is fabulous. I'm going to talk mostly about living donation, but I want to spend just a second or two on deceased donation. Not all waiting lists are the same, okay? Organs are distributed first locally, then regionally, then nationally. There are 58 OPOs, they're called organ procurement organizations. Their job is to go to hospitals when there's a potential organ donor. And when they take these organs out, it goes into a computer and they reach a people that are in need locally first. If there isn't a match, then they'll look within the region. If there still isn't a match for the organ, they'll look nationally. Most kidneys are distributed locally because of the need. So many OPOs have, or many OPO areas have a shorter waiting list. So you can go to one of the other, they call donor service areas or OPO areas, and you can register there. The only limitation for going somewhere else to register is your health insurance. Some private insurances won't cover in going some other locations. If you're on Medicare, they cover you at every single transplant center. So there are shorter waiting lists there. I referenced the link that I'll give you. You can go ahead and click on a link that's there, and it'll take you to a list of the transplant centers, and they'll tell you the waiting list that is there at that current time. Generally speaking, there are in Minnesota, a few hospitals there with shorter waiting lists. Wisconsin, both Milwaukee and in Madison have a shorter waiting list. Iowa has a shorter waiting list, Kansas, and some in northern Florida. But if a deceased donor is a good option for you, then you should be aware that there are shorter waiting lists. On average, it's 5 to 10 years. There are some centers, some areas that have a waiting list of a year or a little more than a year. So it can be significant in terms of the wait. In terms of the, I went backwards. So a little bit of statistics. There were 24,000 kidney transplants last year. Most are from deceased donors. Many people are surprised about that, but most transplants are from deceased donors. About 17,000, little under 7,000 were from living donors that are there. Recently, there have been more deceased donor transplants. Shouldn't say recently. For the last 5 years, they've set a record. More transplants in each of the last 5 years. So that is certainly very positive, but you should understand where they're coming from. most of them are coming from drug overdose deaths. They've doubled in the last 10 years. Those are good organs. They're finding those are very good organs. So it's positive in terms of increasing the numbers, but not for a great reason. Another reason is they are starting to use Hep C deceased donor kidneys, which they didn't use before. And there's about 1,500 of those deaths a year, so that is increasing the number also. So numbers have gone up, and they keep saying the numbers have gone up, and that's great. But these are the reasons why they have gone up. And in terms of more living donation, they have also gone up in recent years. But it's mostly from paired exchanges. I shouldn't say mostly. It is all from paired exchanges. Okay. We really have not increased the number of living donations if you remove paired exchanges, and they've only been done since around the year 2000, around 20 years. So in the last 20 years, unfortunately, if it hasn't been for paired exchanges, we would be at a level that we were at in 2000. So it's a little deceptive in terms of what is happening there. Talked a little bit about matching and the theory that it's very difficult to find a match. It is not. We'll talk a little bit more about the matching requirements, but I prefer to use the term suitable and compatible. A suitable donor, also a suitable recipient, is one that's healthy enough to be transplanted. And a compatible donor means that not only are they healthy enough, they're compatible with the person that they want to donate to. I want to talk about 3 important blood tests that you should be aware of. And I don't know if people can respond to this. I don't know if you have a hands up that you might be able to count. But if you're on the waiting list now, you should know your PRA, okay? And the important word there is the antibodies. PRA is a level in your blood, in the recipient's blood, and it's a simple blood test, okay? So if you're on the waiting list right now, you should know your PRA. If you don't know your PRA, just call your coordinator and say, what's my PRA, okay? So a PRA is measured from the recipient's blood from 0 to 100. Sometimes they call it a percentage of it. So let's just say you have a 20 PRA. What that means is 20% of the population would not be able to donate to you. You have an antibody that would reject their kidney. So you're looking, to be 0 would be advantageous. So some people are 90% antibodies, 95%. I've helped 2 people get a transplant that were 100%. In theory, they couldn't get a transplant, but they used some, which I'll talk about later, a medical procedure to bring down those antibodies. You can develop antibodies in three different ways. Through a blood transfusion, basically they're foreign objects that your body is developing antibodies for. A blood transfusion, a previous transplant, or for some women, not all, getting pregnant. So you should be aware of that, because if you, it's great news if you have 0, okay? And if you know that you have a high level of antibodies, they call it being sensitized, that it might be a little more difficult to find a compatible donor. That's there. Another blood work is called a cross match. Okay, sometimes they'll do, if you bring in a living donor, they'll do the cross match early, but they'll always do it right before the transplant. And what they do is they basically mix the donor and recipient's blood, and if there's a reaction or a positive cross match, that means you will reject that kidney and you can't go ahead with that donor. Okay, you're looking for a negative cross match. And like I said, sometimes they'll do that when they first bring in a donor or approve a donor, especially if you are sensitized or have a high level of antibodies. HLAs are those 6 antigens that we used to need to match in order to do a transplant. But the drugs that we take now overcome the matching. In fact, they often don't match a donor and recipient until towards the end or near the right before the transplant, because it's not that meaningful in terms of outcomes. The drugs we take are really overcoming that. And this shows that a little bit of the antigen idea. So the green are deceased donors, the blue are living donor statistics. So they're combining a 0 match and a 5 out of 6 match in one group because there isn't a significant difference. And this is the, so to speak, the average length of time that these kidneys will function. They call it the half-life, okay? Where 50% of the kidneys are still functioning and 50 have failed. So on a 0 to 5 match, you see that on a deceased donor, on a perfect match, you see it's much better, but it's a very small percentage of perfect matches that occur in deceased donation. In fact, it is so rare that if a organ is available in California and they find a perfect match for that person in, let's say, Chicago or St. Louis, they will send that kidney there. That's a priority. Even though they try to do them locally, these perfect matches, they will ship because how significant they are. And in living donation, you can see that 0 to 5 is almost 18 years, and that perfect match is, again, significantly different. So when we talk about living and deceased donations, how we typically compare them in terms of longevity is we typically say that a kidney from a living donor lasts on average twice as long as one from a deceased donor. And those certainly numbers are significant that are there. Let's talk a little bit about the different types of living donor transplants. There's the related, brother, sister, mother, father, non-related, spouse, everyone else, anyone else that you know. I'll talk a little bit about these non-directed donors. Some people call them altruistic. I think every donor is altruistic. A non-directed donor is someone who says, I want to donate a kidney. I don't know anyone, but I still want to donate. So they're not directing them. My wife directed her donation to me. So these are called non-directed. There's only around 300 to 350 of these a year, but they are amazing individuals. And as you'll see, very, very powerful in terms of helping many people. So, excuse me, here's what we referenced earlier. What Stuart described is a paired exchange. A paired exchange starts out when you have a donor and a recipient that are not compatible. Here we have 2 pair. Could be 3 pair, 4 pair, 5 pair that they put together. And what they do is a swap. They also call them swaps. Donor 1 will donate to the other recipient and donor 2 will donate there. And they're really powerful. Like I said, they're the reason living donations have increased. Years ago, you have an incompatible donor, they'd send them home. Now they can still help that person. So this is a simple paired exchange. They've done a 50 pair exchange over weeks and over a few months and many transplant centers. Another type of paired exchange is called a domino paired exchange, or some people call it a closed paired exchange. Starts out the same way, but this donor is not compatible with either of those recipients. And remember, we talked about that non-directed donor. This is where they come into play, okay? So they're going to come in and make this paired exchange happen. We have another donor, we need another recipient, and they start the swaps. The interesting thing about this recipient that they brought in, this person came from the waiting list. And it's very unusual. I've spoken to a few of them where they get a call one day from their center and they're all excited, to get a call. And they say, in 3 weeks, you're going to be transplanted. And they're confused, because they're just waiting for a deceased donor transplant. So they end up closing this paired exchange. And it is winning the lottery because it doesn't happen very often. But that's one kind of a paired exchange. They call it a domino. In fact, the non-directed donor is called the domino because it makes all the others fall into place. Kind of a cute little name. There's another type of domino paired exchange. It's called ongoing chain, an ongoing, never-ending, or they call them chains. What makes this a little different is they don't bring in the third recipient. So we have an extra donor. Donor 2 didn't donate here. But donor 2 starts another chain next week, in 2 weeks, in a month, in 6 months. Okay? And they play the role of the non-directed donor in another chain. And in that paired exchange, it could be 4 pair, 3 pair, 6 pair. Okay? There'll be an extra donor, same thing, and it can go on and on. That's why they call them chains. I know of one, it had 13 iterations before it ended. And they typically end with a domino paired exchange. They bring in a third recipient. Okay, so they can end in a different way. It is truly amazing about these, and are, like I said, they really are changing the world, these never-ending donor chains for those individuals. I wrote a article about paired exchanges. In fact, the article is called The Paired Exchange Conundrum. Let me briefly describe the conundrum that's there. What has developed is that hospitals will do paired exchanges internally. But what has happened over the years is there are 3 organizations: the Alliance for Paired Donation, the National Kidney Registry, and UNOS, 3 organizations. They don't do transplants, okay? They have, I'm oversimplifying this, they have a computer. And they go to the transplant centers and they say, give us your incompatible pairs. We'll put them in our computer and we will start these chains or these paired exchanges. Generally speaking, if you're in a pool of 20 incompatible pairs and there's another pool with 100 incompatible pairs, it's a numbers game. It's more likely you're going to be matched up in the pool with 100. It's not the only factor, but you can get the idea of how that works. And what has happened is the National Kidney Registry have become the leader in doing paired exchanges. There were about 1,000 paired exchanges done last year. They did almost 800 of them. So when I speak to someone and they have an incompatible donor, I tell them about, paired exchanges, send them the article, you'll get a link to it, you can read about it. To increase your odds, you would need to register at one of any of these affiliates. And so I suggest make sure you're registered as an affiliate of the National Kidney Registry, and then you can look at the other ones. And these links give you a list of the hospitals that are affiliated with each of these organizations that are there. But very, very powerful what's happening in terms of paired exchanges. Some people need financial support for themselves for the transplant or for the donor, okay? Now, these organizations, that these 3 co-ops, they're technically not, they can help financially the donor, so that in terms of paid time off from work, travel, and things like that. But you can also get financial support from many other outlets. There are many GoFundMe outlets that people use. NALDAC is the most common organization. They're funded by the government. And so that's another outlet if you need financial support. And I have others on my website that you could look at. Also, if you have the capability financially to reimburse a potential donor for either their time off from work or their travel expenses, you should let that be known. That should be part of your story. If not orally, then written on your website, okay? You don't have to say how much you have, but you could consider it, okay? Because sometimes, in fact, many people believe that we would increase the number of living kidney transplants if the government provided funds for that. You may have read last summer that the president had an executive order to look into that. It's kind of fallen apart, unfortunately. But many people think that there are individuals out there that just can't take the time off from work. They'd like to donate, but they just can't do that. Or they take care of an elderly person, or they have children, and they need someone in the house for a week or two. If we were to provide them some financial support, it could be very beneficial. So that is something that you could do if you have the financial ability to do that. It's totally legal to reimburse someone for any expenses that they have relating to a transplant. So that's the education part. Let's talk about communication and telling your story. Like I said before, it's all about your story. And people tell stories all the time. And you have to start to get prepared to tell your story, that you're not asking somebody to donate. You're just telling your story. And people say, how often? Looking at my watch, this is a good time to start. You should tell someone every day, everyone, people you meet. You hear about Starbucks baristas donating, or cashiers from grocery stores donating, or a cab driver. How much time did they have with that person? Enough time to tell their story, if you keep it short, okay? Also, using social media, which we'll talk about, keeping it short. This is my story. You're not going to read it. And occasionally I get this on my website. Someone posts something like this. I write them, I tell them I'm deleting it because I'm not even going to read it, okay? Make it shorter so people could read it, okay? Use bullets, okay? And here are some just general things to keep in mind when you are telling your story. These are simple bits of information that you can add to your story, okay? While you're educating them with this kind of information. And the I want to, it could be whatever you want to do in life that's holding you back right now. Take hikes, see your grandchildren, travel, whatever it might be. You want to connect with someone. And the way you connect with someone is to share more about yourself. That's what you do. Advocates are an essential part, as I said earlier, because they often make the donor-recipient connection. You heard about my first transplant. Unfortunately for me, a year and a half after my transplant, I developed a virus. It's called the BK virus, not very common, and it attacks the kidney. There's no treatment for most viruses, and there was no treatment for this. The only thing they were able to do is lower my immune system. It fought off the virus, but I also went into rejection, so they increased my drugs, and we did this for another 3 years, and I finally was told I needed another transplant. And I knew it was coming. I knew what my labs were, and I was watching this. I'd been more educated than I was the first time, but it still wasn't easy for me at all. And it was very difficult to get started. After telling people what to do for 5 years, it was much easier to do that than to take my own advice. But I did. And I started doing the things that we're going to talk about. And one day I was on Facebook. I saw an article. I live in Chicago. A woman posted an article. She lived in Seattle. I contacted her, asked her if she had, some connection to the transplant community. She said, no, she didn't. She just thought it was an interesting article to post. And she said, why'd you contact me? So I gave her my story. And I thought that was the end of that. Well, Stephen, who ended up being my donor, saw her story also, her posting also. And he said he'd been thinking about being a donor for years. And he thinks it's the time to do it. And he saw that and thought she could be of help. She said, I can't be of help, but why don't you contact Harvey? He has this nonprofit organization. And by the way, he needs a kidney transplant. Stephen ended up being my donor. He lives outside of Detroit. The woman in Seattle is basically a neighbor with social media, and so is Stephen. So we have lots of neighbors because of social media. So the point is, that's the way it happens. And I tell this story to people and they say it's a miracle. It's not a miracle. It's happening all the time because that woman is a neighbor of mine, per se. So it's often that person. So you need advocates. And I'll talk a little bit more about advocates here, but especially in the new program that I developed. You know, they'll see things that you won't see. They'll come up with ideas. They'll get the word out. And the best advocate I've found is someone who tried to donate to you and found out that they have a medical condition and they're not suitable and they're not able to donate, because they can start each conversation was, I wanted to donate to this person. So it really is quite meaningful when that person is telling the story about you and your need for a kidney transplant. So advocates are really essential in terms of getting the story out. So what I do is I break out in these presentations a little bit of different groups for you to reach out to. So here are the 4 basic groups that you should think of when you want to get the word out. You know, family member, friends, email, social media. You meet people every day, and getting creative is really, I think, becoming the most important thing for people to do. But it's important to get the word out to family members and friends. And I know it's hard to do that sometimes, but they're the people that care the most about you. So you really want to get that out there, whether it be email, a phone call. You know, meeting now is difficult, but that's going to end. But getting the word out to family and friends is really essential. So I'm going to encourage you to write out your story for many reasons, okay? And then when you write out your story, I want you to say it over and over again, because writing something out and saying it is very, very different. Okay. So you want to write out your story and really start to understand the things that you want to say to people, because you just you don't have that much time. And we'll talk about that a little bit. I encourage people to include the contact info of the donor coordinator at the transplant center, the donor advocate, because sometimes people don't want to ask you the questions. They want to learn a little bit more. Maybe they don't want to donate. They want to learn more about it. And some people don't want to disappoint you should, you know, they not be healthy enough. And unfortunately, a lot of people are not healthy enough to donate. So there are good reasons to include that person's name so they can go somewhere else. And I encourage you to put a photo if you're, you know, doing stuff online or mailing a flyer or making a flyer. You know, photo of you, a child, grandchild, your dog. People love dogs, and even a short video. I'll give you a few links to short videos that I think are great. Years ago, I said 5 minutes on a short video. Now I tell people 3 minutes. I may be converting to 1 minute because we just don't have the patience. I don't know about you, but when I get an email and click on a video and it says 8 minutes, I don't watch it. Okay? So you really need to keep things short, concise. Locally, I ask you to, you know, write out your story. I'm asking you to do that so you can get it to some local media person to get your story in print. There are many local newspapers that are always looking for good, feel-good stories, and you have one. Okay, so don't be afraid to reach out locally and get your story heard. Schools, religious groups, reunions, they all, schools and religious groups all have newsletters. Even ask your, if you're a member of a religious group, ask the senior religious person there if they can talk about you in one of their programs on a Saturday or Sunday in the evening, because that's another way of getting the word out. That's there. If you want to read good stories about people who have gotten transplants or who are looking for transplants, there's a service on Google called Alerts.
Maybe not, didn't start back up again.
For me, no. Google Alerts, you sign up and you put in keywords, kidney donation, living transplant, IgA, and you will get stories every day. I promise you, a dozen every day of people that either need a transplant or just got a transplant. And it was a miracle that they were connected to someone. They're really good, feel-good stories. I would encourage you to sign up for them. They're good to read. Using email, most people use email now, obviously an easy thing to do for most people, but many are not as interested or acquainted with social media. If you're not, then you can learn. Either your library or someone in the school or can help you, or someone you know that uses social media could be helpful. I know when I have something to pass around the family, or I want to get it beyond that, I send a note to my daughter-in-law, Emily, and I say, Emily, please share this. She's got 1,700 people following her on Facebook. It's beyond me that she has that many people following her, but that's the way to get the story out. And people typically will want to share. Okay, that's what they do. Okay, they want to share stories. So don't be afraid to use social media. It really can go viral, which is obviously the goal that's there. So any of the email, Facebook, Twitter, any of the outlets, Instagram, should be utilized. I'm often asked, how often should you send out an email or post? And you can't do it too much. Okay, I mean, 5 times a day would be too much, but every other day would not be too much. There's a program I'll talk about called Tuesdays with Updates. Okay, I don't know if you read the book, or it was also a movie, Tuesdays with Maury, but for me, it would be Tuesdays with Harvey. And on Tuesday, I'll send out an email and just remind people that I'm still here, or provide them some information. Send them a link. There's more information about this on my website and also in this new program. I give you ideas on what you can send out, because some people don't respond the first time. In the marketing world, they say someone needs to see something 6 times, 8 times, 10 times before they go out and will buy it or purchase it or really get interested in it. So you need to keep it top of mind. And that's the way to keep it top of mind. We don't need to see another Pepsi or McDonald's commercial, but they want it top of mind. So when you're hungry or thirsty, you think of them. And that's what you want to do. You want to keep it in front of people to let them know constantly that you're in need of a transplant. I encourage people to set up a Facebook page and a website. They do different things. A website, you can provide a lot of information on there, where Facebook is, you want to get the word out quickly. So they have different functions, and I have more information on that that's there. During this time, maybe we're not meeting people every day, but I think this will end, hopefully, very soon. But we are in a habit of doing something that isn't helpful, and we need to get out of the habit. So someone steps up and says, hey, Harvey, how are you? Our response is fine. How are you? Okay. They really are not saying, how are you? They're saying hello. It's a funny thing that our society has developed, but they really don't want to know, how are you? It's a way of saying hello. People in Europe think it's funny that we ask, how are you, all the time? But that's what we've done. But that's your opportunity. And it's sometimes fleeting. If there are a few people around and someone says, hello, how are you? You miss that opportunity, they're on to something else. So you need to be prepared to tell your story, because that moment is fleeting. We've all had the experience at the end of the day, you met Jim and I meant to tell Jim about this. I forgot to tell him. It wasn't top of mind. This needs to be top of mind for you and your advocates. So you're there when someone says, hi, how are you? And it is an everyday experience. It happens really all the time. It is short-lived. And I talked a little bit about it earlier, but you need to practice. This is not the first time I've made this presentation. The first time I made this presentation, by now I was soaking wet, okay? I had cue cards everywhere. I practiced in a mirror. Once you tell your story once or twice, it'll get easier. I know it'll be hard at first. It is hard at first, but once you practice with someone you know, a family member, a friend, it will get much easier. Getting creative is, I think, the most important thing for you to do. It keeps you sharp, and it keeps your mind thinking about it, okay? This is a business card that I encourage people to use because it's, or to get printed up, because it's something that you can hand out to somebody and give a little bit of your story, and this gives more of it. I'll give you a second to look through it. It's very simple. And in this one, I gave the information of the living donor coordinator that's there. So it's a good tool to have that's out there. You may have seen car signs, really important opportunity, or a good opportunity to get lots of eyeballs that are there. There are car signs for the side. I think a car sign in the back is more effective than on the side, but you know, it can be creative for in any way. You know, I'm not sure if my wife needed a transplant, if I would be comfortable enough standing on the corner, but I've seen many pictures like this. And it's not only wives for husbands, it's husbands for wives. So, you know, it is an unusual thing to see, but not rare. I think lawn signs are fabulous. Okay, this person filled their whole front yard with lawn signs. It wasn't the lawn sign that got them the attention. It was that they had so many and they got on TV multiple times because it was such an unusual thing to be seen. So that was a very creative idea. This is a fella, Lewis, who I helped. In fact, Lewis, the program that you will watch, that I'll give you the link to, the videos, Lewis is going to translate it into Spanish. I've known Lewis for years, and he followed the program. And a woman saw this shirt at a concert and ended up donating to him. So these things happen. I don't know if you remember this one or saw this one a few years ago. This was a guy that wore a t-shirt in Disneyland, and it went viral. Why it went viral, I have no idea. But it went viral, and he ended up getting a transplant from that t-shirt. Billboards, again, good opportunity for getting a lot of eyeballs, but it is relatively expensive. I show this billboard in a newspaper ad to make the point that when you do something a little different, or if you do something a little different, publicize it. Get someone to write a story about it. It increases the number of people that see it. And if you have an interesting story, it's more likely you'll get a reporter, a journalist to write about you, and that expands on it. I don't know if you're familiar with Nextdoor. It's a local community organization. Most towns have their own these days. But there's no shortage. To me, this is the most creative sign that I've seen. First time I saw it, I got emotional. It just really hit me. Just a fabulous idea for this woman to display her gratitude. It was really, still hits me. It's just wonderful. This is. I thought I was going to try to play it. I tried before and it didn't work. But you have the link here, and you can see it's a minute and 11 seconds. It's incredibly creative. Okay, and so you'll see, to try to get creative is really.
Please help find a living kidney donor. Are you the one? It's been devastating to watch my dad, Jim Picarillo, be robbed of his freedom by kidney disease. My name is Bina, and I've been Jim's Fidelco guide dog for over 7 years. Pondo, Jim's first guide dog, and I have flown over 250,000 miles with Jim while having spectacular adventures during his last 25 years, working as a legally blind creative and inventive electrical engineer. Blindness did not slow him down, but he's now overwhelmed by spending over 9 hours every day on a machine receiving dialysis treatments. One blood test can confirm candidacy of a potential living kidney transplant donor match. My dad is grateful to everyone who considers this precious gift of life. It takes an exceptional person to give this exceptional gift. Are you the one? If not, please share this message and join the adventure to help find a living kidney donor.
Even a minute and 11 seconds is long. So you really need to be creative in trying to keep your message short. Interesting, that didn't work before, but it worked then. I'm going to encourage you to search this. Open up a browser and search Craigslist ad, excuse me, I need a kidney transplant. And the reason I want you to do that is because you're going to see hundreds of ads. You're going to see thousands of ads. And if you sign up to get Google alerts, you're going to read stories about people who found their donor on Craigslist. I know 3 of them. So get creative when you're out there. You've done something like this before in your life. If you've ever looked for employment, you've gone through a similar experience. You didn't want to look for employment either. It's not comfortable, but you did it. You overcame the challenge. It is very similar to looking for a kidney. Everyone knows someone who lost their job and did nothing for 6 months. They didn't accept it. They couldn't accept the reality of their situation. But if you're looking for work, you need to develop a plan. I'm telling you to do the same thing. Research options, learn as much as you can. Learn about those options. When you're looking for work, you write a resume. That's your story, okay? When you network, and networking is it when you're looking for a job, okay? You need to be that rock star with the 30-second elevator speech. And I'm going to encourage you to take your story and distill it down to 20 or 30 seconds, because that's important to do also. And just like telling your story, a job interview is there. If you're good at it, you'll get the attention of someone. If you show some emotion, don't be afraid of that, okay? People usually respond positively to someone who gets emotional, so don't be embarrassed about it. Gather yourself for a second, take a couple of deep breaths, and then go on. But it is very similar to looking for employment. I can't encourage you to practice as much as you can and get comfortable doing it. So some more ideas, if you use Google Alerts or see someone's Facebook page and they come up with an idea, hey, it could be your idea too, okay? Imitation is one of the sincerest forms of flattery. When I talk to people, I'll often ask them if they volunteer, and there's dead space on the phone, because they don't know what to respond. Why am I asking them that? Volunteering gets you out there. It gets you to see other people. It gets you into an environment where people are giving. And that's where you want to be. You want to be with people that are givers. I'm often asked, who should I go to? Who are the donors? Who are they? I say who they are in terms of general. They're social workers. They're policemen. They're firemen. They're teachers. They're librarians. They're people of faith. They all have something in common, and that is empathy. They feel for people. They understand others' pain. And there's some proof around this. There are some books and a lot of research done on this. So I would encourage you to, reach out in those areas and spend more time in those areas. And again, telling your story there. I don't encourage, you may have seen in a few of the signs that were there, I don't encourage people to talk about blood type. Is blood type important? Absolutely. It's one of the factors to be compatible. But I don't think you should include it, especially at the beginning when you're talking to people or when you're first getting your story out there. Most people don't know their blood type, okay? So it's no good anyway to tell your blood type. And even worse, some people think they're one blood type, they end up being another. So you tell someone you need an A or an O or whatever it might be, and if someone thinks they're not that blood type, they immediately discount themselves. And there's no reason to do that. So no blood type, paired exchanges solve that problem. Okay, that's one of the primary reasons why someone is not compatible, is blood type and those antibodies that I mentioned. Some centers do transplants with blood type incompatibles. They do this process called plasmapheresis, but they're not very common, but it is some places do that. And plasmapheresis is the process that they use to lower someone's antibodies. Earlier I said when someone's highly sensitized, and I said I've helped some people that were 100% sensitized. They ended up getting a transplant because they found someone that the hospital thought they might be compatible if they lowered their antibodies. And they used this process called plasmapheresis to do that. So blood type, important? Absolutely. Talk about? I don't think so. I don't think it's helpful for you. So here's a link that you could write down. Okay, it's my website with just the letter /IGAN. You won't find it on my homepage anywhere, but it's on my website. It has this PowerPoint presentation, and it has a lot of additional material and articles that you can look at. So it's a great resource for information. And if we can do it, Carrie is going to play the trailer of my new program. It's 1 minute and 40 seconds, but it's a trailer we put together. The program consists of 9 videos and a lot of supporting information. And this is the link that you can go to, okay? So there's no cost to register.
All right, let's see if this works.
Hi, my name is Harvey
Can you hear it?
Marcel. I've developed this program with one goal in mind: to help you have a successful living kidney transplant experience. The good news is that you don't have to ask someone to be a donor. I know that may sound strange, but donors tell me, no one asked me to donate. I was inspired when I heard their story. It's all about your story. Over the following episodes, I'll help you build a team of advocates, I'll educate you about living donation, and I'll help you develop and share your story. You'll be able to educate others and correct people who believe the many myths and misconceptions that are floating around. Let's talk about developing your story. You've written your story, but how do you tell it in person? Using social media is a powerful way to tell your story. Being creative will greatly improve your chances of your donor finding you. Have you considered using a yard sign to tell your story? Paired exchanges have revolutionized living kidney transplant. These are critical components you'll need so your donor can find you. Commit yourself to this program. This can be a new beginning. I'm excited for you. So let's get started.
So this was literally released Saturday after working on it for many months during COVID. It was filmed, edited. I'm immunosuppressed, so I'm not letting anyone in my house. I wasn't going anywhere, still not really going anywhere. So it was really a work of love. I'm thrilled about the program and thrilled that you'll have the opportunity to look at it, because I think it'll be very, very helpful in going through it. So let's. So
Harvey, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. Even for someone who's been through the transplant process, I learned some things myself that I didn't learn the first time around. So there's some great
I learn every day. I learn every day.
There's a link in the chat box to the trailer, and you can click on the link, and you can find the information on Harvey's website on how to register. And we do have one question, Harvey, that someone asked about peered exchanges. And they want to know if they're all done at the same location, or are they shipped out to different locations, is the question.
It's all different, but they do. If you are in one city and your donor is in another city, they can ship the donor can have their transplant in their city, and you can have the transplant in your city. Not all do that, But if that's important for you, I would speak, to your transplant center. I know the National Kidney Registry does that all the time, where they ship out kidneys. They have many, many different programs to benefit the donor. And one of them is shipping of kidneys. Not most, all deceased donor organs are distributed. What has happened over the years is there used to be a very short shelf life. People would carry a beeper around and they would be told, you need to be here in 2 hours. Okay. But they really have been able to sustain most organs for a day or so. But typically a living donor organ is, even if it's shipped, is put in the recipient with a few hours. So it's different for each transplant center.
Yeah, and in my case, my donor was from Los Angeles. So the night before my transplant, my wife and the donor in LA had their kidneys removed. And then that night they were flown across country from Atlanta to LA and LA to Atlanta. And then we had our transplant the next day. So it's pretty amazing experience, to be honest with you. It's pretty humbling. And
It is.
The same person wants to know about if you find out whose kidney you received. And that's up to each individual donor. In my case, I took almost 1.5 years before I found out who my donor was. And I was pretty persistent with my transplant center, sending notes to my donor. And we finally found out that my donor had a daughter. Her daughter got my wife's kidney and I got her mom's kidney. So it's a pretty great story. So it just varies depending upon the donor. Yeah. And so those are all the questions we have. Again, Harvey's a great source of information and reference. I know him because he helped me out, and he's always willing to help people out. And his program is, again, as he mentioned, at no cost to us as patients. So I would strongly encourage you guys to take advantage of it. It's a great resource and a great way to learn more about how you can find your donor. So Harvey, again, thanks again for your presentation. Very informative, and we really appreciate everything you do.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to your group, and I wish everyone the best.
Harvey, we hope to see you next year at Live Spark. This was so great.
Yeah,
That
it was a wealth of information. It was really, really so helpful, and it was just full of, detail and education. So thank you so much.
I'm glad it worked out. Let me unshare this.
You're good.
I'm good? Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Harv.
All right. Thank you, you all.
And then, everybody, don't forget, we have another session coming up next week. Week number 8 is, taking care of yourself, putting your oxygen mask on first. And you can find out more information on our website, www.igan.org/spark 2020. And we hope to see everybody again next week. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Night.